So really, if okay, and now it looks like Fantasy is going to take this time to go ahead and press out. He does have the Science Vessel out, providing some sight for his Marines and his tanks, but they fall back. The Lurkers do to another position and just burrow once again. And until these tanks can catch up and siege up again, those Lurkers are going to be perfectly fine and safe. It looks like Jaedong's already retreated, so once again, forcing Fantasy to just throw down tons of actions per minute, just to unsiege and siege his very, very immobile army as it presses across the field. And Jaedong, again, just in a position now with his defilers out and consume research, is going to go ahead and start swarming up. And here we go. Lurkers down under that swarm, going to cause lots of problems for these bionic units. And now with a ton of Lurkers, an additional swarm thrown down, and it looks like Jaedong in a strong position to just go ahead and completely counter the splash damage that that Fantasy would like to inflict on him with these siege tanks. It looks like now headed towards Jaedong's front door, but additional swarm and additional forces are there to meet him. So really, Jaedong in a very powerful position has split up Fantasy's forces. The tanks are separated from these medics and marines, and really that's just going to be a huge deal. Although finally the science vessel comes back, and now these siege tanks have the vision that they need to try and eliminate these lurkers, and it looks like these lurkers are going to be eliminated by Fantasy's force. So now Jaedong in a position where he is going to need to reinforce the lurkers and hydralisks that he had there before Fantasy regroups and starts coming back towards him. It looks like, though, however, that Jaedong has recovered, has been able to reinforce his units, and is going to be able to halt this forward push from Fantasy. Fantasy scanning this force is going to be aware of it, and what type of reinforcements Jaedong does have. Jaedong now getting irradiated, but an additional swarm down, and lurkers as well as hydralisks pincering in this army from Fantasy, and he's just losing marine after marine. Really, now Jaedong in a commanding position. Looks like additional reinforcements, however, being produced. Fantasy in full macro mode. You are seeing those yellow flashing lights. The lights do not go off in Fantasy's base. Those things are going to be cranking out units all the entire time, and you can bet that he's going to be producing units at a feverish pace. Now taking the time to try and expand, which is extremely necessary, I have to say. But now, with Jaedong, with so much economy, he's just going to be able to, oh, the nice plague there, going to catch some of that infantry as well as the science vessel. But really, these upgraded Marines now, these stimmed Marines, are making short work, or quick work of those hydralisks. Oh, but a nice snipe there on that science vessel from Jaedong. Jaedong does have an overlord in place. He's going to see that expansion as well. So now, probably in a position where he wants to just go ahead and posture for just a little while and just get his numbers game going. Really, he's got the he's right now outsupplied by Fantasy, but really, how long is that going to last? I'm doubtful that Fantasy is going to be able to keep up production with Jaedong if Jaedong can secure this additional hatchery, which it looks like Fantasy is in the process of trying to eliminate. Jaedong's or Fantasy's forces headed up to this upper right location, and Jaedong is going to have to make a stand here. Fantasy's forces are going to be fighting up the ramp, so it is going to be slightly difficult for them, but a ton of Marines, all stimmed, versus a very handful of hydralisks, and really, I do not believe that Jaedong is going to be able to hold this at all. But his forces are now going to be coming in from the rear, and it looks like Jaedong is intent on trying to hold this location, sending tons of hydralisks and lurkers from his main force. He does cancel that hatchery just in time, but now Fantasy's force is going to have to fight Jaedong's on the way out to try and get out of this location. And it looks like a huge engagement here. Marines versus hydralisks, but the numbers just are going to play in Jaedong's favor. Oh! And wow, it's a dropship barely surviving there from some Scourge getting sniped. But it looks like Jaedong is going to be able to clean up this force that that Fantasy had committed to the top right. Or Fantasy now going to drop at Jaedong's expansion here in the 11 o'clock position. And it looks like that Jaedong does not have a particularly large force to deal with this. This drop is going to be successful at his double gas expansion. And wow, a nice plague though from Jaedong, using those defilers to maximum effect. So that plague is really going to help him out there, I believe. It looks like he's hatched Hydralisks just in time as that hatchery went down. Those Hydralisks are able to affect plenty of damage on those Plague Marines, and it looks like Jaedong is going to manage to clean up the forces that were in his base. Meantime, it looks like the second command center has been placed down for Fantasy, trying to equalize out that economic advantage, but still, if you look at the minimap, it just looks like Fantasy is really not in a position at all to counteract the amazing amount of map presence that Jaedong has been able to create at this stage of the game, and really resources starting to accumulate for Fantasy. I'm not sure if he's utilizing that for an additional expansion or why he has so, but he seems to be a little bit mineral heavy at this point in time. And really, the issue I believe for him is that he just does not have enough gas. He needs another gas expansion very badly. In the meantime, Jaedong is gas rich, just in a situation with all that gas, the double gas expansion, and all those other additional hatcheries, where he's just going to be able to gradually out macro Fantasy. And I think that Fantasy is going to try again to head to the top right. But this is a well scouted, and I believe that Jaedong is going to be adequately prepared, sending in his forces from the rear now with cracklings. As well as his lurkers. Scourge being sniped by Fantasy, but look at those lurkers and those cracklings with Swarm. Not a very good matchup against just Medic and Marine. And now Jaedong able to attack from both sides, pressing and hurting Fantasy's forces in the direction that he wants them to go. And I just don't see it happening for Fantasy as he tries to fight up the ramp. Looks like those Scourge are going to land on that Science Vessel, so another Science Vessel being sniped. In the meantime, Jaedong has also burrowed some lurkers behind that expansion of Fantasies. Oh wow, a bunch of medics dying at the hand of those lurkers. Additional lurkers are going to clean up the rest of this force, and Fantasy just really in a bad way at this point. Jaedong is just slowly closing the vice on Fantasy, and now a drop on this other expansion with Zerglings. And really, I'd have to say, like I was saying there, that Fantasy is gradually feeling the effects of this vice-like grip that Jaedong is starting to just hammer down and into place in this game. He's just firmly just establishing this lead. He is not letting it go.